and welcome back to Dark Matter Podcast. I'm Dominique.
And I'm Avalon.
And if you're a fan of the Netflix docuseries Unsolved Mysteries, then you know that they just released their second season a couple of weeks ago. So today we're actually going to be talking about the second episode, A Death in Oslo, because I just found it so interesting. And it was one of those cases where I was like, oh my God, I really want to find out what happened.
Yeah.
I'm trying to solve this mystery. And obviously we're not going to be doing that today, but I think it's, we just wanted to really talk about it and see what we thought.
If anything, it's so frustrating that it's like we just want to get it off our chest. Like,
Definitely,
we don't know what happened, but at least we can frustrate you guys too.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, we wanted to say a huge thank you to everyone who listens and subscribes to our podcast. If you'd like to support us, please don't forget to rate and leave a review on Apple Podcasts because it does help other people find our podcast. So with that, let's jump right in.
So on May 31st, 1995, a woman checked into the Plaza Hotel in Oslo, Norway. She was described as wearing all black and having a short haircut. The woman checked into room 2805 under the name Jennifer Fairgate. However, 3 days later, a hotel security guard went up to her room because apparently there had been no credit card on her file, which I think is very interesting because if you've ever stayed at a hotel, then you know that if you don't have a credit card on file, they usually will not let you stay there.
That's like literally the only thing you need to get in.
Yeah,
like a credit card. That's a basic requirement.
It's usually hotel policy, because if in case you steal anything or damage anything, they need that on file. So I just think it's very interesting.
Yeah, a lot of times they take a deposit just to like make sure you're not screwing around. So like, the fact right off the bat, it's already weird that she never had a credit card on file. Like, how did she get a room?
Right, like how did she check in?
Yeah.
And according to the episode, the security guard knocked on Jennifer's door when he heard a gunshot, and he actually waited a couple minutes behind a stairwell door to see if anyone came out. But when no one did, he left to go get back up, and he arrived with the head of security, who arrived at the room about 15 minutes after he had first heard this gunshot. And the room had actually been double locked from the inside, which meant that only security would be able to open it. And when they did open the door, they found her lying on the bed with a gunshot wound to her head. At first, investigators assumed that it was suicide. However, further investigation into the case, as well as evidence that they started to find, started to point to the option that it actually could have been murder.
Right, and like we've already seen, there is a lot of strange things that they started to uncover. I think they first came across her and they're like, okay, obviously this is a suicide. But then the more they found, the less sense it made. Like literally, they just, every piece of information made a million more possibilities possible. First of all, they discovered that Jennifer Fairgate was a fake name. Nobody existed with that name. At least maybe somebody did, but she wasn't named Jennifer Fairgate. So she had checked into the hotel under a pseudonym and a fake Belgian address. But what's even stranger is when they searched the hotel room, they found no toiletries, no keys, no ID of any kind. And all of her clothes had the tags cut off of them, so they couldn't tell like what brand they were or kind of like trace where they were from or anything. And this one's just really odd. Because all of that before it's kind of paints a picture. Yeah, but it's weird, but it kind of goes in the same direction. This one is just so bizarre. They only found tops. So there was no pants, no skirts, nothing like that. Like, they only found like shirts and like jackets, which is just like, why? Right,
and which is weird because when they found her body, she was dressed. She was lying on bed, but she was fully dressed. So it wasn't as if, like she had no pants. We know she probably had pants, but they couldn't find anyone. They searched her room.
Yeah, and from what I've heard of how she looked, I think she was pretty elegantly dressed.
Like
and
sophisticated.
This was a very expensive place, and nobody thought she stuck out or anything. So clearly she had to at least look like she had money. So it's not like she couldn't afford pants. Why would you not have pants, but you would have shirts? It just didn't make any sense.
Right. And also, again, there was no identification of any kind, like no passport or anything, which, again, if you are traveling to a foreign country, which they believe she was, you definitely need a passport.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'd probably need ID to get the hotel room. At least a credit card, but probably ID as well. I can't imagine they would let her get a room without any ID. Then you could have some sketchy person staying in your hotel. So just, again, the more they found, the weirder it got. And another thing that supported the murder theory rather than the suicide was the fact that she was found with the gun in her hand. But the way she was holding it was really weird. So obviously if they walked in and saw a dead woman with a gun in her hand, they're like, okay, she killed herself.
Right,
But
like that's the most obvious answer.
yeah,
right
like
away.
immediately you'd think that. But the way she was holding it was, it wouldn't make sense. So like usually if you're about to shoot a gun, then your index finger is on the trigger. But the way she was holding it was backwards with her thumb on the trigger. So like holding the gun like this, I guess, and her thumb was on the trigger, which
Right.
you would never hold a gun like that. If you know anything about guns, you would never hold a gun. Even people who don't.
Yeah.
I can't imagine anyone holding a gun like that. And there was also a lack of blood spatter on her hand, which one would expect, obviously, if she had shot herself, the
Right,
blood's going to go everywhere.
It's close range. It obviously would have blood spatter.
Yeah, probably the first thing that's going to get blood on it is her hand, because it's the only thing, especially if it's facing like that, like it's going to get blood on it, and there is no blood on it. So the gun also had its serial number removed professionally, which again is just very odd. That I think also goes more in the direction of like no ID, no tags on her clothes, no serial number on her gun, and the fact that it was removed professionally.
I think I saw an article that mentioned it might have been removed with acid. So it's not
shit,
like common just trying to scratch
Yeah,
out the serial
that's what
number.
I was thinking, is like that someone took like a key to it or something.
No,
like I
yeah.
didn't realize it was professionally, like it had been taken off, which
yeah, like they couldn't trace it at all.
I think it's also odd enough that she had a gun, like maybe less so here in the US, but I'm pretty sure in a lot of places in Europe, that's not a normal thing to
No,
carry
I
around
don't
a gun,
think so at
especially
all.
like Norway. Like, why would you need a gun? You know what I mean? I'm pretty sure the crime rate is pretty low, and like she's a young woman. Like, why would she be carrying around a gun? You know? So I think just the fact, nobody like talked about that really in the episode, but like I think the fact that she had a gun at all is like suspicious,
Well,
or it's just strange.
Yeah, well, I think the immediate theory was when they saw this scene was
Suicide.
that so maybe they thought that she had prepared it, like she prepared a gun, she knew that she was going to kill herself, so she
Right.
packed everything and was kind of getting ready, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I wonder if guns are legal in Norway. I didn't even think of that, because I know they're illegal in a lot of countries.
well,
They didn't mention anything about it, so maybe they are.
didn't,
Or maybe they were
right.
at the time. I don't know.
yeah, this was like 1990s, so
Yeah, so maybe it wasn't a big deal,
laws-
because I just thought of that too. It's like, it seems weird that she even had it. But yeah, if you're thinking it's a suicide, then that definitely makes sense.
Yeah, and then another thing too that they mentioned later on in the episode is that the gun that she had that was found in her hand that they confirmed was used to kill her was a 9mm, and according to experts that they talked to, the recoil on that gun is really hard or really intense. So they're saying that if she had shot herself, especially considering the way that she held it, it would have flown out of her hand if she had shot herself,
Right.
because the recoil would have just
Yeah, if
been
you were
too-
holding it with
yeah.
your thumb, you can't get a good grip on it. That
Yeah.
makes sense that it would shoot back.
Yeah, and she was just a regular small girl. So
Yeah.
they're saying there's no way that a person of her stature would have been able to hold on to that gun.
Yeah,
so if she
especially-
had killed herself, they're saying the gun should have not been in her hand at all.
Yeah, this reminds me a lot of, if you guys are familiar with I shouldn't say murder, the death of Kurt Cobain, the singer from Nirvana. He was found, and like it was the same thing. Immediately, they're like, okay, he killed himself. He had a shotgun in his hand, and he had been, I believe, shot in the head. But the way they found his hand was in such a position that his wrist would have broken off if he had actually done it in that position. So it's very similar to that, where at first it looks like a suicide, but then when you look farther into it, it's like, okay, there's actually no way that they could have killed themselves in that way.
Right, like things don't add up.
Right. And once investigators realized that she had a fake identity, they created sketches of her and put it out in the public, hoping that someone would be able to identify her or report her missing, or just like literally anything. But nobody came forward. And they kept her body for a year, and after that she was buried in an unmarked grave, which is really sad. But
It is
obviously
really sad.
they couldn't put Jennifer Fairgate, that wasn't her name, so there was really nothing else to do.
Yeah, but when I heard that, it made me really sad, because it's like she had a life, but
We don't know.
we don't even know who she was.
She was
I feel
very
like that's the
young too,
saddest
is what's sad.
thing.
Like, she wasn't like, she was a pretty young woman on her own. It's just like, there's just so much that we're missing. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like,
that's
there
why-
has
maybe
to be
that's why
somebody
that
sad that she's gone, you know, but we don't know.
Right. And one theory they postulated too is because, again, no one ever reported her missing. No one came forward as to her identity. And one thing that enforced one of the theories was that she was a spy. So
Yeah, we'll get
that
into
kind
that
of-
more. That like,
Yeah.
it really seems like she was, in my opinion, like it seemed
Yeah, no.
like, why else would any of this be that way? You know what I mean? It seems like it would make the most sense, I think.
Right. And a journalist named Lars Christian Wagner actually took interest in her case, and he started to investigate. And he was actually featured very prominently in this episode. So Unsolved Mysteries reveals that in 2016, Jennifer's body was actually exhumed so that they could get a DNA profile from her, because obviously there have been a lot of technological advances and scientific advancements since 1995, and they now have the tools to possibly be able to identify her. And the information that they gathered revealed that she was in her mid 20s. So, again, she was very young when she died, and she actually was of European descent, possibly from Eastern Germany. So Lars actually traveled to the place that Jennifer wrote down on her hotel form, which she claimed she lived in, which was a tiny town in Belgium called Verlaine. And when we mean tiny, we mean like super tiny, because everyone in this town knew each other. Like if she had lived in this town, there was had to be at least one person who knew her.
Yeah, like it's one of those towns probably that like even if you didn't know everyone's name, you would see someone and be like, yeah, they live here. Or no, they don't live here. Yeah, like it was that kind of, that small of a town.
Yeah, and she even spoke to the town's mayor who had lived there his entire life, and he said that he didn't recognize her at all.
Yeah, that definitely says something. Because like we said, I think this was one of those towns that you would know. At least like you would be like, yeah, maybe she doesn't talk to a lot of people, but I've seen her. You know, like you would know. It just seems so odd. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a strange detail about this area, this like place that she said she was from, is that the address she gave was similar enough to a real one in Verlaine that she had to have been familiar with the area to provide this address, but it was just off, so it wasn't a real address. So for example, like imagine the address was like 135 Dark Matter Avenue, right? Then she would have put 535 Dark Matter Avenue. So like it was a real street and it was very similar to like a real address,
yes,
but it was just off, so it didn't exist. So it's like, that tells me, because I was saying like this earlier, it wasn't like 123 street, like street boulevard. Like it wasn't something stupid.
Address.
Like it existed, and it existed in the town that she said it did, in this tiny ass town that you had to be familiar with to know. Like why would she choose a town like that, you know? So she definitely knew of the town somehow.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe that she had known someone in the town, or she had passed by and it maybe meant something to her, because why would she choose this town, you know?
Yeah, exactly, because it seems suspicious to, like, let's say like she's like choosing a fake place, that, or obviously she chose a fake name, and she's like, let's say she's choosing a fake place too that she's from. Why would you choose somewhere that everyone knows each other? It just seems so odd, because that seems so quickly that you can rule out that she was actually from there. So why did she choose this town? And she was obviously, like we said, familiar with it. There's some connection, but we can't really say what the connection was.
And then one thing too that they mentioned in the episode was that she had provided a fake phone number on the hotel forms as well. And they tried the phone number, it wasn't real, but like the area code, normally if you're in an area, the area code is the same. And they compared the numbers to the ones that people actually had, and it was very similar again.
So the same thing, like she knew, like I was saying this earlier too, that like the internet, I guess the internet existed at this point, but it was not accessible like it is now. Like 1995, that was before we were born. Like the internet was not what it is today. So it's not like she could just Google Maps like some random place. You know what I mean? Like that wouldn't be plausible. So the fact that she knew the area code, she knew addresses that sounded realistic, it implies that she was familiar with the area. Even if people weren't familiar with her, she was familiar with the area, which is so bizarre. I guess it would make sense if she visited, that people wouldn't recognize her because they're like, well, she doesn't live here. But
so many details.
She knew something about that city, and we just don't know what it was. We don't know how she's connected.
Right.
And there's a Norwegian intelligence officer, I think his name is Ola Kaldiger. I don't know if that's right. But he suspects that Fairgate was a secret agent, and he thinks that she had been tracked down and assassinated. And apparently cutting tags off of your clothes and removing serial numbers from guns are common procedures for agents, which makes sense because kind of what I mentioned earlier, if you take the tags off your clothes, you can't trace where they came from.
Right.
And obviously with the gun, you can't trace where the gun came from. So it makes sense that they would do that.
Yeah. And this is funny because when I was watching this episode, before this guy had even come on screen, I was like, oh, it kind of sounds like, what if she was a spy? But in my head, I was like, no, that's crazy. That's not. And then this guy, who's a literal spy, intelligence officer, went, she was probably a spy. And I was like, okay, that's it. Yeah, this is the answer. There's no other answer.
Yeah, for sure. Because it makes so much sense, because I guess like it all kind of lines up, but then there's nothing makes sense. Exactly. Because the fact that she was clearly trying to hide. She did not want people to know who she was or where she was or what she was doing.
Yeah.
So that kind of seems like in line with what a spy would do. But there's so many other theories too that make sense too. And another weird detail is that Fairgate almost never left her room for the entire stay, which I think the entire stay was 3 days total.
Yeah, 3 days.
And so almost...
And she had, for the entire time, she had her do not disturb sign on the room too. So,
like the entire time, which is weird. You would want to get your room clean.
Or at least I would imagine that if you would want like one night to yourself, but usually if you're staying multiple nights, you think to yourself, okay, I'll get my room cleaned this one day and then the next day I will.
Yeah. However, she did leave one time. So the key card data showed that she left the room at one point and didn't return for 20 hours, which is so bizarre. Again,
it's a very long period of time.
That's so weird to like stay in your room for like 2 days or whatever and then leave for almost a full day.
Yeah.
And
for a full 24 hours almost.
Yeah, almost an entire day. And what she was doing during that time, who the hell knows? And one of the maids that worked at the hotel said that during that 20-hour period, I guess they did go into the room. I don't know if they like just ignored the do not disturb sign. I'm not really sure.
I'm assuming that maybe when she had left for that 20-hour period, maybe she did take the sign off. Because again, that's true. Maybe how did the maid get in there?
Yeah, so they probably assumed that she left already or that, that she probably took off the sign. But whatever the case may be, the maid said that she went in there at that period and she found the room completely empty, which if you've ever stayed in a hotel, you're probably familiar with how it goes.
Just toss everything.
Put everything everywhere. Yeah, it becomes your room very quickly. You just have your stuff all strewn about.
Yeah.
So the fact that it was completely empty is just so bizarre.
I mean, maybe she was just like a neat freak, but I do find it a little strange.
But I think she was saying like there wasn't anything in the room. You know what I mean?
Okay,
like I'm not sure. Maybe she had things in the closet, but she said it was empty. It just comes off as weird.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think about that there was like nothing in there, but that's true. Maybe she could have hidden all
She might have
things.
taken her stuff with her. She might have kept all her belongings with her at all times because we know she didn't have very many things with her.
Yeah, that's also a possibility. And one thing that was not mentioned in the episode was the fact that her autopsy results revealed that her stomach contents actually contained bratwurst and potato salad, and she'd actually ordered this from room service the night before. So this suggests that she'd actually been killed after eating the meal and her body was found later. So at first, maybe people assumed because the security guard heard that gunshot that she had been killed like very recently, but because of these results, this meant that she had eaten the food and then she had been killed early enough that she didn't have time to digest this food. So an article that I read said that she had either been killed earlier than they thought, or she had just eaten the food like a day late, which to me makes less sense.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, because why would you order food and then eat it like a day later?
Yeah, and I think it seems like they didn't find or they didn't like notice anything else in her stomach. So why would you literally order food and then wait an entire day to eat anything? That just seems so bizarre. I didn't even connect that in my mind that they heard the gunshot like right when they went up there.
Right. Because when the security guard knocked to get her car, that's when he heard a noise.
That honestly, actually, that puts even more of a wrench in it for me because that just really makes no sense. Because if you think about it, so like you said, it seems that she was probably killed the night before. So where the hell did the gunshot come from?
Right. I mean, it could have been that someone else was still in the room with her. Like maybe someone had stayed to clean up the evidence or something.
Well, wouldn't they be able to tell from like was the blood like you'd think the blood would be dry at that point? You know what I mean? I don't think I heard anything about that because like you'd think that if you walked in and like
that's true.
But honestly,
and, like,
the guys who were handling it, I don't think they were like super prepared for it. I don't like not to diss on them. I just like I don't think they ever had handled something like this. They were just security guards at a hotel. I mean, honestly, like they probably weren't trained for this. I could imagine this was not something that happened often. So maybe they didn't pay enough attention to that. But like you'd think they would mention, oh, her blood was dry. So it was the night.
They mentioned too, like if there was someone who murdered her, which is what the evidence points to more and more, is that they could have staged her body the way that it was found and stuff like that. So he could have tampered with evidence or, whatever.
Yeah, because this was definitely like a professional hit. I think we can agree on that this was not some like rando. This wasn't like a mugging, obviously. Either, So whoever did it did what they did on purpose to confuse everybody.
Absolutely, yeah. And it works because, I mean, everyone is
because we still don't know 25 years later.
Yeah. Weirdly enough, Jennifer was not the only person who died mysteriously in Norway that has a connection to Belgium. So there was a man named the Camo Man, because again, we don't know his identity either, who was found in 1987 near train tracks in South Norway. And again, he was also found without any form of ID and with the tags also cut out of his clothes. So that's weird to me, because Jennifer also had that, and that I don't think that's a common practice as far as I know, to cut off the tags.
Sometimes I cut off my tags because they bug me.
Right, but not
all of your clothes.
single,
That's very specific.
Yeah, and when they tested his DNA, they connected this man to Belgium as well, which is, if you remember, the same place that they connected Jennifer to, or where they believe that she
had
originally
some
lived
connection.
from.
Yeah. And then, weirdly enough, there was another example of this. So there's the Istil woman. I don't know if Istil is the area, but again, we don't know her name. So they all have these like random names.
They're all like Jane or John Does, basically. Yeah. We weren't able to find their identity.
Yeah, we know nothing about them. And she was found, this is really gruesome, partially buried alive with poison in her stomach. So they went all in with killing her. And she was found in a remote area in Norway called Ice Valley. And she was also found, or she was like from or somehow connected to Belgium. They traced her back to Belgium, but she was found in Norway. And there were encrypted notes and disguises found in her possessions. So she sounds very much like a spy. She literally had, disguises? I don't know what they meant by disguises, maybe like glasses and wigs and things like that. That's what I think of. Maybe that's not really what they do. I don't know.
Right.
But they found some kind of disguises and weird notes, I guess, that probably we wouldn't understand, but it was probably in code. And again, the tags were cut off her clothes. And it's theorized that she was a spy because, I mean, like, she had disguises and she had coded notes. It seems very obvious, but it's just so weird that 3 people within not that long of a time period. I'm not sure when the Istel woman was found, but as far as I know, at least the first 2, not that far apart in time, they're all from Belgium. They were all found killed in Norway, and they all had their clothes
cut off, no identity.
Cut off with no ID. Yeah, it just seems really bizarre.
This is so weird to me. Okay, was Norway and Belgium, were they in like a secret spy war?
Yeah, was something happening? Like, y'all good? Like, what was going on there?
Because it's not only, I mean, the fact that 3 people in Norway were found like without any ID, tags cut off, is weird enough. But the fact that they're all traced to Belgium.
Yeah, Belgium's not a big place. Like, I know, like, I'm assuming they're pretty close to each other, Belgium and Norway. I don't know where everything is.
Yeah, they're both in Europe, but
like the fact that they're from Belgium, found in Norway, is just so specific. Like, how many people are from Belgium? Like, not that many.
I wonder if any investigators or anything have tried to connect the cases together, because to me they just seem very similar.
Especially the 2 women. They seem weirdly similar. The guy too, but the woman, the fact that she had disguises and everything, it's just. And the article I was reading about this even mentioned that, like, there is striking similarities between her case and the Jennifer Fairgate case, because there's just too much in common with them to not be somehow connected.
Yeah, I mean, to me they seem very, very similar. I would want to look into that more.
For sure.
Yeah, so now we're going to jump into our thoughts and theories that we thought of while watching this episode and doing research. And one of the things that, again, stuck out to me the most when I was watching this was the fact that she was somehow able to check in without giving a credit card. Because I've traveled internationally and I've checked into hotels, especially considering this hotel was, a very prestigious one at the time. Yeah. So I would imagine they have a very tight ship to make sure that, all their guests are accounted for. They know, like, who was where and stuff like that. And when you go to an international hotel, again, they usually take your credit card, but they also usually take your passport. If you were out of country, they will take your passport and they'll check it to make sure that everything is, clear.
Yeah, you're not fleeing the country or something. Yeah.
So just for safety purposes and stuff like that. And the fact that she was able to check in without we don't think she gave any ID, any form of payment. So it's just so weird to me, the fact that she was able to even check in and get a room. And a Reddit theory that I found suggested that Jennifer possibly bribed an employee, which, again, reinforces the spy theory. Like, hey, if you get me this room, and, you know, without asking any questions, here's like a good amount of money.
Yeah, or it seems like if she was a spy, like I don't know how spies work or
Maybe
those
she had, like, a
organizations, but
connection.
yeah, it
Yeah.
seems like with those organizations, I'm thinking of James Bond, I'll be
Right.
honest, but I feel like with those kind of organizations, they just have it handled. You know what I mean? It's like you don't have to worry about it. Like they'll get it handled. They'll communicate with who they need to. They'll show their badge to who they need to or whatever it might be.
Exactly.
But like that seems like literally it seems like the only way she could have gotten it, bribery or being associated with someone or an organization. Because like you said, there's just no way, especially at a luxury hotel.
Yeah.
But even at like a Motel 6, there's no way you're going to get a room with providing no ID, no credit card, nothing. Like there's literally no way you could do that. I don't know how you could pull that off.
Yeah. And the weirdest thing to me that the episode kind of brushed over, and this may be because it's confusing, is the fact that there are some people who worked at the hotel who reported seeing her check in with a man, and even on the hotel form that she wrote her name on, there was a man named Lois Fairgate. However, you know, according to people, they never saw him again after this check-in.
Oh, so they did see him the initial time.
Some people reported seeing him. That's the thing.
Do you think that's interesting? Do you think that they just like, it was like they were thinking back and they're like, oh yeah, I saw a guy, but like no one ever really saw him? Or did some people say like, for sure I saw a guy?
I think it depends because, I mean, obviously not everyone see him, but I think it depends on eyewitness testimony, which we all know tends to be a little questionable.
Sucks. Yeah.
Yes. to put it kindly. Yeah, it's very questionable. And so it could have been some employees just claiming that, oh, I swear she checked in with a man. But if that's true, then why was the name Lois Fairgate written down?
Yeah,
like, where did it come from?
I think another thing to consider too with these cases is that you or I could have been working at that hotel and we wouldn't have thought of anything. You know what I mean?
Exactly,
We wouldn't have thought like, oh, she's with this guy or she's not with this guy. It's like we would have just been doing our job. Like they're not thinking about that. Nobody was thinking, oh, I bet she's a spy. I think she's going to be found dead in her room in a few days. So looking back, it's one of those situations that it's like, I'm sure some of the workers feel this way. Like, damn, I wish I paid more attention.
Right,
but why would have they? You know what I mean? There was no reason to. So it's hard, especially relying on eyewitness testimony, looking back, that if they didn't know that there was another man there or nobody said anything about that. And they're like, yes, I saw a man with her. That seems like, okay, yeah, there was a guy there.
Right.
But if they already heard that, like, you know, there was some other person and they're like, oh yeah, I think I saw a guy, then it's like, well, we don't know. Maybe there wasn't a guy at all. Maybe she said there was.
And or maybe she was supposed to meet up with someone and then didn't.
Maybe he killed her. Who knows? Like maybe whoever Lois Fairgate or whoever that guy was, maybe he's the one who killed her. Like, we literally have no clue. And he was never seen again, as far as I know.
No, the episode doesn't mention ever trying to...
They
like,
did
ever
breeze over that.
Yeah,
they kind of glaze over that. It's like, that's definitely important.
Yeah, so, but as far as I know, they never found a Lois Fairgate.
Yeah.
So we already know that the spy theory is very prevalent in this episode, but other theories also suggest that she may have been a sex worker or a criminal. And when I thought of that, I was thinking it is possible that she could have been like a high-class call girl or an escort, and she was meeting like a very powerful, wealthy client there.
That would make sense as to how she got in.
Yeah, and maybe something went wrong and he killed her, or maybe the Lois Fairgate, if she was a spy, maybe he was like her handler or something. I mean, I don't know, honestly, because there is a big possibility that there was this man with her and that he could have been the one involved in her death in some way.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that does make sense that she was a sex worker in some I mean, criminal is like a lot of things. So I think if she wasn't a spy, she was a criminal. I think that's for sure. But for a sex worker, that is a really interesting theory that I never considered myself, because again, she would want to lay low. She wouldn't want people to, you know, she wouldn't want to have her ID on her or anything. She would have a fake name, most likely. Right. But some of the things like, well, maybe you would want to have a gun if you're a sex worker. I don't know. I go back and forth. I'm like, well,
or it could have not been her gun.
Yeah, that's true. It might have been. Yeah, I don't know. There's just so many. It's like that is definitely plausible. I have it in my mind that like she was a spy, but it's definitely plausible she was a sex worker. I'm not really sure.
If the guy she was with was wealthy and powerful, you know, he could have connections to the government, and he said, "Hey, listen, I accidentally killed this escort that I was with. I need you to come here, help me clean up this crime scene."
That's so true. And they would have taken care of it. Or it could have been her pimp. It could have been so many different people. It could have been like the two people involved, at least for her, if she could be anyone. But then the other person involved also could be anyone. It could be another agent. It could be pimp. It could be a client. It could be like anyone. We just don't know. And one thing that they mentioned in the episode is that the door was double locked on the inside. You mentioned that earlier too, that originally supported the suicide theory because literally nobody could get through that except for somebody with a card or security.
Right, like how do you double lock it from the outside? You know?
Yeah, exactly. However, investigators actually conducted a test of how someone could have killed her and double locked the door, and it was actually possible, although a person would have to know what they were doing.
Which supports the spy theory. Yeah.
Exactly. So they could have potentially, so from what I could understand, like they could have double locked it and then...
They never specified how they would be able to do that because it wasn't mentioned in the episode, but they did conduct a test, and I guess it was possible. I mean, probably not, like we said, for the average person, but if you're someone who is trained, then this probably would be fairly easy for you.
Yeah, I think that's what they figured out was that, somebody could have done that, but it's negligible because it would require so much skill. But obviously, we're dealing with a professional here. And one thing that you mentioned was that the security guard left the room unattended for 15 minutes, which is very weird.
It's weird to me because when I heard that in the episode, I was like, wait, he just left the room? Like he left?
Another thing they glazed over.
Yeah. Didn't he have I understand he wanted to go get the head of security and wanted to go get backup. But do they not have radios? Like, hey, listen, I just heard a gunshot. Like, everyone come quick. I mean, I don't know. Again, this was back in the mid-90s, so maybe they didn't have that.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things, like I said, that, like, they aren't trained to deal with this, so they probably were like, what the hell is going on?
Like, call the police, we just have to go.
Honestly, they probably want to get away from it if possible because they were scared. But it's just weird that they leave for 15 minutes. Like, that's a good amount of time to be like,
there was enough time for someone to escape, for sure.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like,
did they ever question the security guy? I don't know.
I know.
He's looking a little suspicious.
Yeah, exactly. Like, considering this was definitely professional, probably 1 minute would be enough for them to escape.
Oh, yeah.
Let alone 15 minutes.
Yeah, like, they just left that door
They're probably
unattended.
in another country by now. Just kidding. But still, like, they could have, like, so much could have happened in 15 minutes that we don't know. Those 15 minutes aren't accounted for.
Exactly.
And another weird thing was that the gun that was used to shoot her was a 9mm semi-automatic Browning pistol. But it wasn't mentioned in the episode that it was later found to be a fake.
And I don't know what that means, but I'm assuming guns have, like, brands, like the manufacturer and stuff like that.
Bootleg.
Yeah, so I'm assuming it was, like, a bootleg gun. Again, I don't know why it would be, but
so
that does, to me, enforce the spy theory, like, it's
that's what
like a stolen gun or a hidden gun, something like that.
That came to my mind because I was like, what would a bootleg gun be other than if it was like she was a spy and they make their own guns? You know what I mean? That it's like that maybe they make their own guns and they make it look like Browning, like whatever, some like popular brand, but it's like their own brand. I don't know. That seems like a lot of effort to go to, and it seems like it would really make things more difficult, if anything. So I don't know, but it's just another loose end. Like, it's literally just another weird thing.
Yeah, to me, in my mind, I fully believe that it's possible that she was a spy. Because another thing they brought up, too, is the fact that no one reported her missing. And the intelligence officer who was on the episode mentioned that sometimes when a spy or an intelligence officer is killed in the line of duty, that government or whatever agency will go to that family and basically just say, listen, your daughter, family member, whoever died in the line of duty, but that's it. We're just going to take care of you, but they won't speak out. Yeah, you know what I mean? So it's possible because no one ever reported her missing. No one ever tried to claim her body.
Just the fact that she was a 20-something-year-old and nobody knew her. Like, maybe she was antisocial, but she had to have had either a family or grown up with somebody. Like, literally anyone. She had to have had some human interaction through her life.
Someone had to have known her.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I thought of too is that the fact that she was claiming, at least, to be from this really small town in Belgium, it seems like that's not somewhere you would move. It seems like that's somewhere you'd grow up in.
Yes.
So, like, nobody there knew her. Like, I don't know. It's just, you'd think somebody in that town would have at least known her as a little girl. Like, I don't know. It's just, it seems so strange to me that absolutely nobody came forward and said, yeah, I know her. Because that definitely implies, like you said, that they were paid off or they were told by the government, hey, she died, this is what happened, or like...
Yeah, don't question it.
Exactly. So it just seems very odd that literally no one came forward.
Yeah. I mean, there are a whole bunch of things in this episode, like we mentioned. It's just so crazy. There are so many possibilities, and we don't have any answers even from now. That was obviously it's an unsolved mystery.
25 years later, there's just nothing.
Yeah. But we'd love to hear your guys' theories. What do you think? Do you think she's a spy, or do you think... I honestly don't think she was just randomly murdered, for sure. I think it was like a definite,
there's no
planned
way.
hit.
Yeah, even if she wasn't a spy, because people get like assassinated that aren't spies. You know what I mean? So even if she wasn't a spy, which I tend to believe she was, even if she wasn't, this wasn't a mugging. This wasn't something random.
Act,
somebody... Sure. And I don't think it was even somebody closer. Or maybe it was. I don't know. But this seems like...
It was
like
targeted.
They were sent there. You know what I mean? Like this was... a professional job.
At the very least, it seemed like she was definitely either hiding or running from something or someone, because why else would you check in under a pseudonym, you know?
Yeah, and have nothing on you.
Yeah.
It's too weird. I want to hear you guys' theories though, because I know that there's some good ones out there. I would have never thought of the sex worker on my own, and that's actually
Reddit
a really
was
good
very
one.
interesting. I was interested.
They
to
always
see
have
their
the good theories.
Yeah. But anyway, that is the end of this episode. We hope you guys enjoyed listening, and we will be back next Monday with a brand new episode.
And to make sure you don't miss any announcements, follow us on our Instagram, which is @darkmatterpod, and our Twitter, which is @darkmatter_pod. And as always, our full list of sources will be on our website, which is darkmatterpod.com. All right, thanks for listening, guys, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.